You wake up in a world where the sky is always gray. Not stormy, not raining, just gray. The kind of gray that seeps into your bones and makes you wonder if color ever existed at all. You walk outside and people pass you with blank faces, moving like they know where they are going but have no idea why. There's no chaos, no violence, no screaming headlines demanding justice or revenge, just quiet compliance. And yet something is deeply, profoundly wrong. You feel it in your chest, a tightness that doesn't go away, a whisper in the back of your mind telling you that this isn't life. It's a simulation of it, a carefully curated illusion of peace built on a foundation of silent suffering. No one talks about it. No one even seems to notice. But you do. And the more you look around, the more you realize evil isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it hides behind smiles and laws and the comforting hum of routine. Now ask yourself this. What if the worst forms of evil don't come from monsters but from ordinary people who have forgotten how to question? Think about the last time you saw cruelty justified as necessity. The last time you heard someone say, "I was only following orders." Or worse, "I had no choice." How often do we excuse ourselves from moral responsibility by pretending we are powerless? And yet history has shown us again and again that when enough people believe they have no choice, entire civilizations fall into darkness. Fyodor Dostoyevsky knew this better than anyone. He didn't write about dragons or demons. He wrote about men. Men who looked just like you and me. Men who smiled, who prayed, who loved their children, and still committed unspeakable acts. In Notes from Underground, he gave voice to a nameless narrator consumed by self-loathing and rebellion, a man who chooses pain over comfort simply because he refuses to be predictable. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov commits murder, not out of greed, but out of ideology. He believes himself to be above morality, a new kind of man who can transcend conventional ethics for the greater good. And in the Brothers Karamazov, Ivan Karamazov argues that if God does not exist, everything is permitted, that without divine authority, morality collapses into chaos. But here's the paradox. Dostoyevsky did not write these characters to condemn them. He wrote them to reveal a terrifying truth, that evil is not born in shadows. It is born in thought, in ideas, in choices made quietly in the privacy of one's own mind. So why do we keep looking for evil in the wrong places? We search for it in war zones, in prisons, in the faces of those we call monsters. We build systems designed to contain it, laws to punish it, religions to warn against it. But what if the real danger lies not in the act itself, but in the belief that we could never commit it? What if the greatest evil is not malice, but the refusal to see ourselves capable of it? Imagine standing before a mirror. Not a physical one, but a psychological one. One that reflects not your face, but your soul. What would it show you? Would you recognize the person staring back? Or would you recoil at the thoughts you've never dared speak aloud? Dostoyevsky forces us to confront this mirror. He dares us to look beyond our own illusions of goodness and ask the most dangerous question of all. If given the right circumstances, are you capable of evil? Not hypothetical evil. Not abstract evil. Real, undeniable, irreversible evil. And if so, if you are capable, what separates you from those who have already crossed the line? There is no simple answer. That's the point. Because understanding evil is not about labeling others. It's about recognizing the potential within yourself. It's about realizing that morality is not a fixed state. It is a constant battle. A daily choice. A war waged not against external enemies, but against the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. This is the secret Dostoyevsky understood better than any philosopher before or since. Evil is not the absence of good. It is the corruption of it. And the closer you get to the light, the darker your shadow becomes. So now you stand at the edge of a precipice. You've seen the reflection in the mirror. You've felt the weight of the question. Are you ready to understand? Or will you turn away and pretend you never saw it at all? Let's begin. You have asked the question, and now you must answer it. Not with words, not with philosophy or theory or clever justifications, but with action. Because evil does not announce itself with horns and fire. It arrives in small choices wrapped in reason, disguised as duty, hidden behind the illusion of inevitability. You are not born into it. You walk toward it step by step, each one justified, each one rationalized, until one day you look down and realize your hands are stained, but you no longer remember when they became that way. This is the hidden problem, the one Dostoyevsky saw more clearly than any man before or since. It is not that people do evil because they are weak or corrupt or broken. No. They do it because they believe they are right, because they have convinced themselves, deeply, completely, that their actions serve a higher purpose. That is the true horror. Evil is not chaos. It is order imposed by those who believe they see the world more clearly than others, who believe they understand what must be done. Even if it requires pain, even if it requires sacrifice, even if it requires murder. Think again of Raskolnikov. He does not kill out of hunger. He does not kill for money. He kills because he believes himself to be an extraordinary man, one who can transcend morality for the sake of progress. He convinces himself that the old woman he murders is useless, that her death will bring about something greater. And so he commits the act, not in rage, not in desperation, but in cold, calculated belief. Does this sound familiar? History is littered with men like him. Philosophers who declared that the individual must be sacrificed for the collective good. Leaders who believed that war was necessary to build peace. Revolutionaries who thought terror would bring freedom. All of them were certain. All of them were wrong. And yet how many of us operate under similar illusions? We tell ourselves we would never hurt another person. We tell ourselves we are kind, compassionate, ethical. But what happens when kindness conflicts with convenience? When compassion becomes inconvenient? When ethics stand in the way of success? Do you still choose them? Or do you find a way to justify walking away? This is the psychological root of the hidden problem, denial, not of evil itself, but of our own capacity for it. Dostoyevsky knew that the human mind is not designed to confront its own darkness. It flinches from it, hides from it, creates elaborate narratives to protect itself from the truth. Which is why the underground man exists. In Notes from Underground, Dostoyevsky gives us a character who refuses to participate in these comforting lies. He is bitter, self-loathing, contradictory, but above all, honest. He sees through every rationalization, every justification, every grand ideology that promises salvation through submission. He knows that beneath every utopia lurks a nightmare, that every system built on certainty eventually demands blood. And so he rebels, not for justice, not for freedom, but simply to prove that he is not predictable, to prove that he is not a cog in a machine, to prove that he is real. But here's the tragedy. His rebellion is also a prison, because he cannot escape himself. He is trapped in his own mind, endlessly questioning, endlessly doubting, endlessly resisting, and yet unable to create anything new. He destroys but does not build. He rejects but does not replace. Isn't that the paradox of modern existence? We live in a world obsessed with deconstruction. With tearing down systems, ideologies, institutions, we question everything. Distrust authority, reject dogma. But what do we offer in return? Nothing. Only silence. Only the echo of our own doubts. Dostoyevsky foresaw this long before it became reality. He understood that without meaning, without belief, without something to hold on to, man does not become free. He becomes desperate, and desperation breeds violence, not always physical. Sometimes it takes the form of nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, that life has no inherent value, that morality is arbitrary. Other times it takes the form of fanaticism, the need to impose order at any cost, to force meaning where there is none, to demand obedience, purity, perfection. Both paths lead to destruction, because both deny the complexity of the human soul. Dostoyevsky did not write to preach. He wrote to reveal, to show us the battlefield inside every human being, the war between doubt and certainty, between freedom and control, between love and fear. He showed us that evil is not an alien force invading the human heart. It is part of the human heart, born from the same impulses that give rise to goodness. Love can become obsession. Compassion can become manipulation. Faith can become fanaticism. Hope can become delusion. And righteousness can become the most dangerous illusion of all. Because once you believe yourself to be right, you stop listening, you stop questioning, you stop seeing, and in that moment you become capable of anything. So ask yourself again, are you capable of evil? Not because you are bad, but because you are human, because you are afraid, because you want to be right, because you want to belong, because you want to matter. These are not sins, they are simply truths. And until you acknowledge them, until you stare into the abyss of your own potential, you will never truly understand evil. You will only become its next victim, or its next architect. Now you begin to see, but seeing is not enough. You must go deeper. You must understand the consequences, not just of actions, but of ideas, of beliefs, of the stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the world. Because those stories shape reality. And some of them are killing us slowly, quietly, without anyone even noticing. You have seen the mirror, and in its reflection, you have glimpsed something you cannot unsee. The realization does not come all at once. It creeps in slowly like a fever that begins with a chill and ends with delirium. At first, it is just an uncomfortable thought, a whisper beneath your conscious mind asking questions you would rather ignore. But soon that whisper becomes a voice, and then a scream. Because now you understand. Evil is not an aberration. It is not some foreign force invading the human soul from the outside. It is born within us, not from malice, but from meaning, from belief, from certainty. This is the unseen consequence of Dostoyevsky's revelation. Not that we are capable of evil, but that we are already doing it. Every time we justify cruelty for the sake of order, every time we silence dissent to maintain peace, every time we look away because seeing too much would require action. Evil thrives not in the open, but in the blind spots we create for ourselves. It hides in the stories we tell, the narratives that define our identities, shape our values, and dictate our actions. These stories are not lies, but they are incomplete. They are simplifications of reality designed to make the world feel manageable. And in that simplification, we lose something vital. We lose truth, because the human brain is wired to seek patterns, to find coherence in chaos. This is not a flaw. It is a survival mechanism. Our ancestors needed to recognize danger quickly, to make sense of their environment without hesitation. But in the modern world, this instinct has become a double-edged sword. We no longer need to fear predators lurking in the shadows, but we still fear uncertainty. So we build structures around our beliefs. We surround ourselves with people who confirm what we already think. We consume information that aligns with our worldview and reject anything that contradicts it. This is cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort of holding conflicting ideas, and we avoid it at all costs. But here's the problem. Avoiding dissonance means avoiding growth. It means staying comfortable while the world changes around us. And when we refuse to change, we become dangerous. Not because we want to hurt others, but because we believe we are protecting them. This is how ideologies take root. This is how revolutions turn into tyrannies. This is how ordinary people become instruments of horror. Dostoyevsky saw this before psychology had even begun to name these mechanisms. He understood that belief can be a prison as much as a sanctuary, that certainty can be a weapon as much as a shield, and that the most terrifying evil is not committed by those who know they are doing wrong, but by those who believe they are doing right. Consider the neurological basis of this phenomenon. Our brains are constantly predicting outcomes based on past experiences. This predictive processing shapes our perception of reality. We don't see the world as it is, we see it through the lens of our expectations. Which means that if we believe ourselves to be good, we will interpret our actions as good, even when they harm others. This is confirmation bias at work. We filter out contradictory evidence. We reinterpret ambiguous situations to fit our existing beliefs. We remember events in ways that support our self-image. And over time, this creates a feedback loop. The more certain we become, the less willing we are to question ourselves. And so, the cycle continues. We do harm, we rationalize it, we believe ourselves righteous, and we repeat. Until one day we look back and wonder how we got here. How did we become someone we never meant to be? How did we allow ourselves to fall so far? But there is no single moment of corruption. No dramatic turning point, only 1,000 tiny choices, each one justified, each one reasonable, each one made in good faith. That is the true horror. Evil does not announce itself. It arrives dressed in virtue. It speaks in the language of necessity. It wears the mask of compassion. And by the time we realize what it has done, it is already inside us. This is why Dostoyevsky's work remains so profoundly unsettling, because he does not give us monsters to hate. He gives us men to recognize. Men like Raskolnikov, who kill not out of hatred, but out of ideology. Men like Ivan Karamazov, who destroy faith not out of rebellion, but out of logic. Men like the underground man, who reject society not out of madness, but out of clarity. They are not villains. They are warnings. Warnings that the greatest dangers lie not in the external world, but in the architecture of our own minds. And unless we confront this truth, if we continue to deny our complicity in the systems we claim to oppose, we will remain trapped. Trapped in cycles of violence justified as justice. Trapped in illusions of goodness built on silent suffering. Trapped in the belief that we are different, that we would never do the things history accuses us of repeating, but we would. We do. We just forget. And forgetting is the final act of betrayal, not against others, but against ourselves. Because every time we choose comfort over truth, every time we prioritize certainty over curiosity, every time we silence doubt to preserve belief, we betray the very thing that makes us human, the ability to question, the capacity for change, the freedom to choose. And until we reclaim that freedom, until we stop looking outward for monsters and start looking inward for truth, we will never escape the unseen consequences of our own hidden nature. Now you begin to understand, but understanding is not enough. You must act. You must rebel, not against the world, but against yourself, against the parts of you that resist change, against the voices that say you are already good enough, against the comforting lies that keep you asleep, because awakening is painful, but remaining asleep, that is the real crime. And the cost is measured in lives unlived, in truths untold, in evils unrecognized. Until now, until today, until this moment. When you finally ask yourself, are you ready to break free? Or will you let the unseen continue to control you? The choice is yours. But know this, once you see the trap, there is no going back. You have stared into the abyss, and the abyss has not looked away. It watches you still, not with malice, but with quiet inevitability. It knows your habits, your justifications, the stories you tell yourself to sleep at night and wake in the morning believing you are good. It knows that awareness alone is not enough, that seeing the trap does not mean escaping it. And so the question remains, what now? This is the moment of rebellion, not the kind that burns cities or topples statues, though history is full of those. No, this rebellion is far more dangerous. It does not require a weapon. It does not demand a war cry. It begins in silence, in thought, in the simple yet devastating act of choosing to see, to truly see, yourself, the world, the choices you make every day without realizing their weight. Dostoyevsky understood that rebellion is not destruction, it is clarity, a refusal to accept the illusions others call truth. He did not write about saints or sinners. He wrote about people who could no longer live within the lies they had been told. People who broke free not because they were stronger, but because they could no longer bear the weight of pretending. Consider Raskolnikov again, not as a murderer, but as a man who believed himself above morality. He convinces himself that some lives are worth more than others, that the ends justify the means, that he is an exception to the rules that bind ordinary men. But when the weight of his actions becomes unbearable, when guilt eats at him like rot beneath the skin, he does not double down. He breaks. He confesses, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because he can no longer lie to himself. That is the first step toward freedom. Confession, not to others, but to yourself. Acknowledging that you are capable of evil, not because you are broken, but because you are human. This is not a condemnation. It is a liberation. Because once you admit your capacity for darkness, you are no longer ruled by it. You stop looking outward for monsters and start looking inward for truth. You stop blaming society, fate, or circumstance, and begin taking responsibility for the choices you make every single day. But how do you begin? How do you dismantle the illusions that have shaped your life? How do you break free from the narratives that define you? Start here. First, embrace doubt. Certainty is the enemy of growth. It creates prisons disguised as truths. It makes you deaf to contradiction and blind to complexity. Doubt, on the other hand, keeps you awake. It forces you to question, to explore, to evolve. Dostoyevsky's underground man may be bitter, self-loathing, and contradictory, but he is never certain. And in that uncertainty lies his only freedom. So ask yourself, what if I am wrong? About my beliefs, about my values, about the way I see the world. Ask it often. Ask it relentlessly. Let doubt become your compass. Second, confront your contradictions. Human beings are not logical creatures. We hold conflicting beliefs. We say one thing and do another. We want justice but crave comfort. We claim to value truth but run from discomfort. This is not hypocrisy. It is being alive. But denial of these contradictions is what traps you. If you believe yourself to be compassionate, why do you look away from suffering? If you believe yourself to be fair, why do you excuse injustice when it benefits you? If you believe yourself to be moral, why do you rationalize harm? These are not flaws to be hidden. They are signals to be followed. Each contradiction points to a deeper truth waiting to be uncovered. Follow them, even if they lead you somewhere you don't want to go. Third, reject ideological purity. History is littered with revolutions that began in idealism and ended in bloodshed. Why? Because those who seek to change the world often fall into the same trap as those they oppose. They confuse certainty with virtue. True rebellion does not demand purity. It embraces complexity. It understands that morality is not a flag to be raised, but a fire to be carried. One that must be constantly tended, reevaluated, and protected from burning everything else down. Dostoyevsky saw this in Ivan Karamazov, a man who rejected God not out of hatred, but out of logic, who argued that if there is no divine justice, then anything is permitted. And yet, even as he speaks these words, he cannot escape the consequences of them. He cannot unmake the suffering they unleash. Ideas have weight. They shape reality. And those who wield them must carry their burden. So abandon the need to be right. Abandon the need to belong to the correct side. Abandon the illusion that truth fits neatly into slogans or ideologies. Truth is messy. Truth is uncomfortable. Truth is terrifying. But it is also the only thing that sets you free. Fourth, reclaim your agency. You are not a product of your environment. Not entirely. You are not a cog in a machine. not if you refuse to be. Dostoyevsky's greatest act of rebellion was writing characters who defied prediction. Men and women who made choices not because they were programmed to, but because they chose to, even when those choices brought pain, isolation, or despair. That is the essence of true freedom. The ability to choose, even when the cost is high, even when the path is uncertain, even when no one agrees with you. You do not have to follow the script written for you by culture, tradition, or expectation. You do not have to repeat the patterns of your past. You do not have to be defined by the sins of your ancestors or the systems you were born into. You can choose every moment, every breath, every action. That is your power. And with it comes responsibility. Not to be perfect, not to be pure, not to be right, but to be real, to be honest, to be awake. So rise, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in defiance of blindness, defiance of complacency, defiance of the comforting lies that keep you asleep. Break free, not from the world, but from the illusions that control you. Because once you see, once you understand, there is no going back. And once you have seen, you must act. You must choose. You must become. Not the person you were told to be, not the person you think you should be, but the person you choose to be, in the face of everything, even in the face of evil, especially in the face of evil. Because now you know, evil is not the absence of good. It is the corruption of it, and only those who see themselves clearly can resist becoming its next vessel. So take the first step, then the next, and the next, until you are no longer walking in shadows, until you walk in light, not because it blinds you to darkness, but because you carry it with you, as a weapon, as a shield, as a guide. This is the rebellion, and it begins now, with you. You have rebelled, not with fire, not with fury, but with a quiet, unshakable refusal to remain blind. You have stared into the abyss of your own nature and chosen not to look away. You have seen that evil is not some distant force. It is woven into the fabric of your thoughts, your beliefs, your choices. It does not wear horns or wield a blade. It speaks in reason. It moves through certainty. It grows in silence. And now you understand, evil is not the opposite of good. It is the distortion of it. So what remains? What truth can anchor you when every belief has been questioned? What meaning can guide you when every ideology collapses under scrutiny? What hope can sustain you when you know, deeply, irrevocably, that you are capable of both great love and terrible harm? The answer lies not in escaping yourself, but in embracing the full weight of who you are. This is the final realization, the deepest secret Dostoyevsky left behind. Not only that you are capable of evil, but that only by accepting this can you become truly free. Because freedom is not the absence of temptation. It is the presence of choice. And choice requires awareness. You cannot fight what you refuse to see. You cannot change what you deny within yourself. This is why so many fall. They believe they are immune. They think themselves different from those who came before. They tell themselves they would never do the things history condemns. And then, quietly, without realizing it, they do. Not because they are monsters, because they believe they were already good. And so they stopped questioning, stopped listening, stopped seeing. But you have seen, and once you see, there is no return. There is only forward, towards something greater than innocence, towards something deeper than virtue, toward integration. This is the ultimate truth. That morality is not found in purity, but in wholeness. To be whole is not to be perfect. It is to accept all parts of yourself, the light, the shadow, the potential for creation, the capacity for destruction. Only then can you begin to choose, not out of illusion, but out of clarity. Only then can you act, not from fear, but from understanding. Only then can you live, not as a prisoner of your nature, but as its master. Dostoyevsky did not write about saints or sinners. He wrote about human beings, about men and women who wrestled with doubt, with faith, with suffering, with meaning. He understood that the soul is not a battlefield between good and evil. It is a crucible, a place where both are forged, where both are necessary, where both must be acknowledged, because to deny one is to empower it. To reject the shadow is to give it control. To pretend you are incapable of evil is to become its instrument. But to face it, to name it, to carry it with honesty instead of denial, that is power. That is freedom. That is transformation. So ask yourself again, are you capable of evil? Yes, of course you are. You are human, and humanity has always carried both the capacity for grace and the potential for horror. But now ask the next question. What will you do with that knowledge? Will you bury it? Or will you use it to awaken? Will you let it paralyze you? Or will you let it guide you? Will you allow it to define you? Or will you allow it to refine you? Because here is the paradox. Your greatest danger is not your darkness. It is your refusal to see it. And your greatest strength is not your goodness. It is your willingness to question it. This is the rebellion that lasts. Not the fleeting rage against injustice, not the momentary cry for truth, but the lifelong commitment to self-awareness, to humility, to growth, to responsibility, to the daily, relentless act of choosing who you will be, not once, but always, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. Because character is not defined by applause, it is defined by choice, by integrity, by the courage to stand alone, to stand still, to stand in the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how uncertain, no matter how terrifying. So now you walk forward, not as a savior, not as a saint, not as a hero, but as a man or woman who has seen, who knows, who chooses. And in that knowing, you become something rare, something real, something dangerous, because you are no longer predictable, no longer controlled, no longer asleep. You are awake. And once you are awake, there is nothing you cannot change, nothing you cannot face, nothing you cannot become. So take the final step into the unknown, into the self, into the truth. And remember, evil is not born in shadows. It is born in thought, in ideas, in choices made quietly, in the privacy of your own mind. But so too is goodness. So too is love. So too is redemption. So too is freedom. And now that you understand, you are no longer bound. You are free. And with that freedom comes the heaviest burden of all, responsibility. For yourself, for your choices, for the world. Because now you know, and knowing is everything. So go, walk into the world with open eyes. Carry your truth like a flame. Protect it, nurture it, use it, not to destroy, but to illuminate, to reveal, to transform. Because the world does not need more certainty. It does not need more righteousness. It does not need more ideology. It needs people who have seen, people who have faced themselves, people who have chosen, people who have awakened, people like you. And now that you have seen, now that you have chosen, now that you have awakened, there is no turning back. There is only moving forward, with purpose, with clarity, with courage, because now you understand, and now you must act.